All right, today we're going to dive into a really fascinating spiritual framework. It takes some of the biggest concepts we think about tragedy, Christ, even our own sense of self and it totally reframes them. Let's see how it all fits together.
So, right at the heart of this whole belief system is this one really provocative question. It asks us to just stop and think, what if tragedy isn't some kind of punishment or just a random cruel event? What if it's something else? What if it's an opportunity? This one idea really sets the stage for everything else we're going to talk about.
Okay, so how on earth could tragedy be an opportunity? Well, to get that, we first have to understand the thing it's supposedly acting on. And in this theology, they call that the self's time capsule. And the central idea here, the metaphor they use, is it's pretty powerful. Picture this time capsule as a kind of protective shell that we build around ourselves. It's a state where our soul can get locked into just one way of seeing the world for our entire life, and it completely stops us from growing. So, what actually builds this capsule? Well, according to this way of thinking, it's made from our deepest, most primal fears. The fear of getting hurt, the fear of being destroyed, and maybe the most interesting one, the fear of our own deep inner wisdom. These fears build a shell to keep us safe, but, they also keep us completely stuck. So, if we're all walking around potentially stuck in these little personal capsules, what on earth could get us out? Well, that brings us to the moment when that capsule cracks. The idea here is that something really intense, a profound loss, a major shock, can be the one thing powerful enough to actually crack that time capsule. It's not that it was sent for a reason, but that the sheer force of the event can push us into a deeper state of awareness that, honestly, we'd probably spend our whole lives trying to avoid otherwise.
All right, so the capsule cracks, then what? Where are we headed? Well, in this framework, the destination is an awakening to what's called a timeless knowing.
So what does this awakened state actually look like? Well, it's not about leaving the world or floating off somewhere. It's about becoming really conscious of your own energy and breaking free from the idea that you are only your physical body and your job title. The whole point is to start living from that deeper, timeless wisdom and to actually embody your highest self right here, right now, on Earth. So what's the model for this? What's the blueprint for this state of being? This is where we get into a really different way of looking at what this source calls a universal Christ consciousness. Okay, so check this out. They set up this really interesting comparison. On one side, you have the common view, Christ as unique, historical person separate from the rest of us. But on the other side, Christ is framed as universal consciousness, the highest level of love and light. It's a potential that exists inside every single soul and even within all matter. And it all kind of boils down to this one really powerful statement from the source material. All are the Christ consciousness. In this view, Jesus wasn't an exception, but a full demonstration. He showed what was possible for a human being, but the potential itself, that's in everyone. Okay, but wait. If this potential is inside all of us, what's blocking it? What gets in the way? Well, this is where they point to something they call the ego's false saviors. And here, the source completely redefines the word antichrist. It's not some single evil being. No. In this context, an antichrist is any person, any teacher, any system that wants you to worship them. It's anything that draws your energy and your focus to an external source, distracting you from the real journey, which is inward. And this kind of distraction, it usually happens in a pretty predictable way. It all starts with a real, living, direct spiritual experience. Then, that truth gets interpreted and turned into a concept. Then those concepts get organized into an institution, and pretty soon the institution itself is a few steps removed from the actual living truth it was founded on. And that brings us to this really great metaphor they use. Churches, doctrines, all those structures, they're seen as scaffolding. They can be super helpful, temporary paths that help a soul along its journey, but they are not the destination. They're just the structure built around the truth, not the truth itself. So if the destination isn't an external institution, where is it? Well, when you start putting all these pieces together, the message becomes really, really clear. The path is within. All right, let's just do a quick recap of the core ideas here. We started with tragedy as a kind of pressure that can wake us up. From there, we see this Christ consciousness, not as one person, but as the highest potential inside every one of us. We learned that any external system that asks for worship is actually a distraction. And that means churches and other institutions are just stages on the journey, not the final truth. It all points to one thing. The real goal is a direct, personal knowing of your own self. And that just leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If, as this theology suggests, all the churches and doctrines are just the scaffolding, then what is the core living truth that they were all originally built around? That's something to think about.